supplied a little workforce to the already existing workforce. What we brought with us was solidarity and hope and support for the Palestinians. These two boys had been hit by explosive devices fired from Israeli airplanes and unmanned aerial vehicles, the UAVs or the drones. The one boy had a shrapnel injury through his brain and he later died. The other boy was actually awake when he came in and his whole face was smashed. His facial skeleton was fractured and both eyes were so severely damaged that we had to amputate them, take them out. He survived. He was evacuated to Egypt later. I don't know his whereabouts now, but of course these two young boys were civilians. They should never have been targeted. They should have been protected by the international community. They are children. And they were 2 out of hundreds, if not thousands of children who were killed and injured. Approximately 400 children below the age of 18 were killed by the Israelis and 2,500 children were injured. It's hard to understand these numbers, but 50% of the 5,500 injured were women and children. So the child martyrs constituted almost 1/3 of all the killed in Gaza. So in that way, these two boys, these two shababs, represented the plight, the suffering, and the enormous losses for the Palestinian families in Gaza.
Now, during Israel's attack, more than 1,400 civilians were killed. We read stories about this, the Simoni family, who were herded by the Israelis into one area, and then they were attacked, and more than 30 members of the family were killed. And there were horrific stories about their suffering, and then the Israelis wouldn't even allow paramedics to rescue them for 3 days. Did you come across any of the Simoni family members? Could you please tell us something about that?
Yes, a large number of them. And in our book, which is called, as you said, Eyes in Gaza, and which is now being translated to Arabic and English, Swedish, Finnish, and Italian also, I'm writing extensively about the Samuni patients that I treated. Jumana Samuni, Amala Teya Samuni, Farash Samuni, Mahmoud Samuni. Many of these children were trapped in the house and experienced that their own parents were killed next to them. Amala Teya Samuni was trapped in the rubble for 4 days before her brother Farash Samuni bravely managed to rescue her, and she came to Shifa. So did Jumana Samuni, a small 9-month-old girl who lost her father. Her mother, Maisa Samuni, managed to protect her with her body, but we had to amputate 3 out of 5 fingers, half her hand, more than half her hand, 9-month-old. So there is no doubt that the massacre of the Samuni family was a war crime. And I'm sorry to say that it seems like nothing is happening as to take criminal action against the perpetrators of these crimes. There should, of course, be a case where all the war crimes from the Israeli army and the Israeli government should be investigated. And as you all know, the Goldstone report by Justice Richard Goldstone, who himself is a Jew and called himself a Zionist, is a very extensive documentation of the Israeli war crimes. Me, for one, I do not support the shooting of rockets into civilian Israeli villages and cities. We have to bear in mind that 13 Israelis were killed and 1,400 Palestinians. And 10 of the 13 Israelis killed were soldiers, and only 3 were civilians, and none of them were children. So there is an immense disproportion between the suffering and the losses of the Palestinian people in Gaza and the neighboring Israeli population.
Now, you say in your book that Israel you had used chemical weapons. Tell us something about these, and what are the implications of the use of such weapons in international law?
We haven't said that we have proof that they used chemical weapons. What we have said is that we are quite sure that they used a new type of weapon, which is called the dime weapon, dense inert metal explosives, which is a heavy metal alloy with a tremendous explosive force that do not deliver shrapnels as an ordinary grenade would do, because the explosive device is contained in a plastic casing. But the force of the explosion is such that it will rip off the arms, the legs, or cut people in two even. And we saw a large number of injuries that cannot be explained having been caused by other types of weapon. The first time they used this weapon was in Lebanon in 2006 and in Gaza in July 2006 during what the Israeli called the Operation Submarine. So I had seen these injuries in Shifa before. And the Israeli military forces and the government have not admitted having used it, but they have not denied having used it either. These weapons are developed by the US Air Force, and it's a new generation of extremely destructive weapons, yet not banned internationally because nobody knows about them. It is probable that they will cause cancer. At least the residuals of these explosives do cause cancer in experimental studies in animals. So we were seeing a large number of these dime bomb explosive injuries. We did also see flechette injuries from these small steel needles in the bombs. We did not see phosphorus burns, but we know that there were patients with phosphorus burns coming to Shifa, and the Israelis have admitted that they did use phosphorus grenades against, among other things, UN schools that served as shelters for Palestinian civilians. That is also strictly illegal according to international law.
Now you referred to the report that Justice Richard Goldstone of South Africa had published in September of 2009. Prior to that, there was also the report by the UN Human Rights Rapporteur, Professor Richard Falk, who actually stated that Israel is guilty of war crimes. Do you think anything will come out of these reports?
Well, first of all, I think that both the Arab League with the Fact-Finding Commission, which is an extensive report, pretty much similar to the Goldstone report, and the Amnesty report, and the good reports from the Israeli human rights organizations like B'Tselem, these reports are incredibly important because they are giving us the facts, the numbers, the realities. They are interviewing the victims, the family members who lost their loved ones, and they are constituting a large amount of evidence of what happened in Gaza. And as such, they should serve as important sources of information and knowledge for people. You can find them on the internet. I downloaded the Goldstone report from the internet and printed it. And once you study these documents, you become much more knowledgeable about what happened. Now, I guess that your question pertains to whether or not this will be a criminal court case at the International Criminal Court in Hague. That remains to be seen. The Goldstone report will be handled by the Security Council in the UN. Probably US will veto it. But it is possible that the Arab League will take the case of Gaza to the International Criminal Court. And I am quite sure that there are currently so many lawyers and human rights organizations around the world who want justice to see happen in this case, that this is not ended by any turning down of the Goldstone report. 7 Norwegian lawyers have filed a case against Israel. British lawyers have done the same. And there seems to be a ban on the Israeli high officers from traveling now because they fear being arrested. And you know the case of Tipni Levitz being, or close to being arrested in England. So they fear, and what the Israeli government and the Zionists fear more than anything is the isolation from the international community, and in particular from the West. So I think these reports are incredibly important and should be read by good people who want to know history and who wants to learn more about the Palestinian situation. And in addition to that,